The shadow of the Kanishka bombing has returned as a brazen terrorist threat has been made, asking Sikhs not to travel by Air India on and off after the 19th of November. I'm Barkha, Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Gurpatwant Pannun, the lawyer for Hardeep Nijjar, the Khalistani separatist, killed in Canada, leading to a full-blown diplomatic battle between India and Canada, with the United States of America wading in as well, has made an open threat to Indians, warning them not to travel by Air India on the 19th of November and afterwards. He has made an open threat that those who do so would be endangering their lives. Pannun's threat comes in the aftermath, or right, actually in the midst of a full-blown diplomatic war between India and Canada that has shown no signs of abating. Pannun has been the lawyer for Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the Khalistani separatist who was killed in Canada. Canada blamed India for the assassination. That has led to a complete cold freeze between the two countries. The United States of America, of which Pannun is a citizen, also seemed to express concerns at the killing. India completely rejected the charge that Indian agencies had anything to do with the killing, but called out Canada for its patronage of terror groups. This patronage is clearly not extended or confined to Canada alone. The United States of America is now complicit in this. How will they respond? They're, of course, too preoccupied with what's happening in Israel and Palestine, but this concerns India and our part of the world directly. Let's introduce our panel of experts today as we ask whether the global debate around the killing of Nijjar will finally change after the threats from Pannun. Will Western media finally stop calling Nijjar a Sikh leader and a Sikh activist? Joining us is a veteran diplomat, Ambassador Navdeep Suri. Always a pleasure, sir. Also joining us on the program is Chirayu Thakkar. Chirayu had a piece, a very interesting piece, arguing that it was very difficult for countries to take sides on this. Will that still be the case after this threat? We'll find out. Somebody for whom this is very personal and very difficult, Sanjay Lazar. Sanjay lost his entire family in the Kanishka Air India bombing. He's the author of a book on that bombing. For years, he's been demanding justice from Canadian authorities for the men who bombed Air India. And also joining us is lawyer and analyst and commentator Sherveer Panag. Always a pleasure. I did not want to have to play out the full statement of Pannun, but I think it's important to play out the operative bit just to show you the impunity with which this man, a designated terrorist, is able to conduct himself, slipping in and out of Canada and the United States, addressing rallies in Canada, returning to the safety of the United States where he is a citizen. Listen.
We are asking the Sikh Panth, do not fly Air India. 19 ਨਵੰਬਰ ਤੋਂ ਗਲੋਬਲ ਬਲੌਕੇਡ ਤੇ 에ਅਰ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੱਲਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਏਗੀ। ਸਿੱਖ ਪੰਥ ਵਾਲਿਓ 19 ਨਵੰਬਰ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ 에ਅਰ ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਚ ਸਫ਼ਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ, ਜਾਨ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਰਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਔਰ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਹ ਸੁਨੇਹਾ ਹੈ ਭਾਰਤ ਨੂੰ, ਇੰਦਰਾ ਗਾਂਧੀ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ 에ਅਰਪੋਰਟ 19 ਨਵੰਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਬੰਦ ਰਹੇਗਾ। ਇਹ 19 ਨਵੰਬਰ ਉਹੀ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਦਣ ਵਰਲਡ ਟੈਰਰ ਕੱਪ ਦਾ ਫਾਈਨਲ ਵੀ ਹੈ।
So that last line, he's actually linking the World Cup final to an open terror threat. This video has gone out on all platforms, social media platforms. It has not been taken down. No country in the world has moved to arrest this man, and it is absolutely horrifying. Navdeep, what can be, Ambassador Suri, the possible justification for this man not being behind bars? It is actually chilling to watch him. This cannot be dismissed as mere rhetoric. We have here an actual victim of the Kanishka bombing. He lost his entire family as a young child in that bombing. And he's juxtaposing the threat to passengers on Air India with the World Cup final, which is taking place in India. And I don't think anybody should be taking this lightly, Ambassador Suri.
Absolutely, Barkha. Let me just make 2 points. One is, I think the impunity with which he makes these statements out of Canada also, again, for the nth time, exposes the hypocrisy of the government in Canada. Because we've just seen over the last month some very tough statements emerging from Trudeau himself when you had pro-Hamas or pro-Palestine rallies in Canada. And suddenly all those glorious notions of freedom of speech seemed to dissolve into thin air when these rallies were taking place and some fairly nasty things were being said. But I do have a somewhat contrarian point, Barkha. I think that jokers like Pannu um, they thrive on the oxygen of publicity. And it's a little ironic that I'm saying this while speaking on your program. But I really think that maybe we should just shut them out for some time, deprive of them of the publicity that they seek, and instead perhaps think of turning the spotlight on the wonderful members of the Sikh community, the Vice Chancellor of University, the eminent surgeons and doctors, the academics, the professors, and others who are leading very normal lives as persons who are proud of their Indian heritage, who are proud of their Sikh faith, and who are honorable Canadian citizens at the same time. Maybe we should start talking a little bit about them and not about the most.
I hear you. I hear you. But here's my problem with your argument with respect. It's the shadow of Kanishka. We know that this can happen. We know that this has happened. We know that the men who did this did not even spend significant time in jail. I wish we could ignore quote unquote jokers like Pannun, Ambassador Suri. But can we take a chance with not taking this threat seriously?
No, I think our agencies should take this threat very seriously. I think the Canadian agencies and others should take this threat very seriously. I think there should be active cooperation between the agencies to make sure that nothing untoward happens. But at the same time, I guess the point I just want to make is that he says some of the most obnoxious things because he knows that they will get attention. And he knows that there is a degree of impunity with which he can say this. And I just feel that at some point we should start also depriving him of his need for publicity.
I understand what you're saying, and I just want to bring in a kind of personal perspective from Sanjay Lazar, who spent many years of his life actually working with Air India. But that's not the reason he's on this program today, not because Air India has been threatened, but because as a young boy, he lost his entire family when Air India Kanishka was bombed. Sanjay, to hear Air India threatened again in this way, to hear a man sitting in the comfort and the safety of Canada and America to be able to make this threat, to not have any action taken against him, while somebody like yourself had your entire family wiped out in Kanishka, how would you respond to Ambassador Suri's suggestion that maybe one way is to stop even reporting what these men say, let the agencies do their job? Is that the way forward? I don't know.
Thank you, Barkha. First of all, with respect to Ambassador Suri's suggestion, I was on your show some time back, and I remember, telling you that we need to bring this to people's attention so it's never repeated again. That must have been a month ago. And here we are, bang in the middle of November, and this joker does this all over again. He is not somebody to be ignored. First of all, he is not somebody to be trifled with. He has put out posters in Surrey, and our diplomats got attacked. During the course of writing my book, I interviewed consular officials, the acting High Commissioner of India at that time, and he was attacked prior to Kanishka. He sent out 38 memoirs. I'm putting this on record so that people know. And Ambassador Fabian, he was in the Middle East after that, told me himself that, I was attacked. And I think he reported on your show, actually. And he said, nobody bothered. So we can't take this guy lightly. Number two, my question is, before my grief, my sorrow is deep within me, and it's coming out in my book, but it's also Air India, the government of India. Everybody else has to take note. But what is the US government and the Canadian government doing? You have the Patriot Act, you have the UK Terrorism Act, you have Canadian Terrorism Act. You have so many laws that should have jailed this man in whichever country he is for making a threat to an international airline, whether it is KLM or Pan Am or anybody. You cannot do this after 9/11. There are laws on the books in at least 20 countries of the world, and you can't allow this. And this guy has threatened Indira Gandhi Airport, Air India, and the World Cup final. I mean, if nobody else is willing to do it, I'll file an FIR. Just let's go and get this guy, issue a red corner notice and pick him up. Yeah, he's jumping between Canada and the US. Why are we keeping quiet?
Can I ask you, although I know it's traumatic to repeat it every time, but just as you said, so people don't forget. And Kanishka has been the great forgotten massacre of our time in some way. Sanjay, you lost 3 members of your family when the plane was blown up, right?
Yes, I lost my entire family, Barkha. I lost my dad, who was the in-flight supervisor. I lost my baby sister, who's there, in the photograph, and I lost my mom, my stepmom, and I was just a kid then. And not only Barkha, I not only lost my family. That flight had all my dad and mom's friends, people who'd seen me grow up, who'd grown up with me. There were family crew members with families. So it wasn't just one member going out. It was a long 12, 14-day flight. It was like a holiday flight. So it's essentially the entire ecosystem, the support system that went out. And it was terrible. I don't want anybody else to go through this. And I've said this before to you. And I'm sure the Indian government will step in very strongly, the Ministry, Home Affairs and the Foreign Ministry. But I want to see, foreign governments who were yapping a month ago about us killing, allegedly some terrorist who they called a priest. I mean, he's not a Sikh. He's not a priest. I'm sorry. Those guys are terrorists. The Sikhs are a wonderful group of people, and we love and respect them. They've contributed so greatly to India and to Canada.
Yeah, I want to just briefly bring in Ambassador Suri before I go to the point of law, and I think Sherbir is well placed to answer that. I know, Ambassador Suri, you're not suggesting that this man is to be taken lightly. I think what you're saying is let the agencies and the governments take him seriously, but let the media not platform him. But Sanjay also makes a compelling argument. Kanishka has been a forgotten. If Trudeau hadn't done what he'd done, we wouldn't even be talking about Kanishka. The fact that today we're talking about Kanishka is because of this new controversy. So to that extent, maybe, I don't know what the best way is. It is important to keep calling these clowns out, and I wish they were only clowns, but they're really dangerous men. Ambassador Suri.
Barkha, first, I'm an admirer of the work that Sanjay has done to really document the relentlessly the circumstances that led to the horrible bombing of Kanishka, and really salute to him for persevering in the face of the challenges that he faced. And it is important to remember that. I made a limited comment because when I see the kind of things he's saying that we will rename Delhi as airport as whatever Satwant Singh Airport and this and that, he is simply seeking publicity on those, and that's where I feel that we need to find ways to deny him that. And concentrate really on the point that also Sanjay made about using our exceptionally good relations with the US, and maybe to a certain extent the action should more be in Washington, given the state of our relationship with Ottawa at present.
Yeah.
Maybe use our good offices through the India caucus in the US Congress to take up this issue more aggressively, and perhaps that's one way that we haven't pursued sufficiently in his case.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. But what's appalling is the levels of ignorance about Khalistani groups, Khalistani terrorists, the Kanishka bombing in the Western media, and even within Canadian society itself. Before I come to Sherbir, there was actually a survey with some very, very telling results that showed, if we can have those numbers up on our screen now, that showed actually a complete sort of lack of information, waiting for those numbers to actually come up. But okay, as they come up, Sherbir, let me bring you in. Sherbir, do go ahead. Most Canadians do not know about the Air India bombing. I just wanted to flag that. That is the operative point, that we're all really agitated about it, but most Canadians don't even know about it. 9 out of 10 Canadians had very little to no knowledge about this. Sherbir, go ahead.
Thank you, Barkha. I'm of the view that first and foremost, we can't take the likes of Gurpatwant Singh Pannun lightly, for several reasons. The first being that even before the Kanishka bombings had happened, there were multiple signs, including statements of similar nature, which were brushed aside, saying they can't do anything of this nature, that were made in Gurdwaras in Canada. And then it ultimately culminated in the Kanishka bombings. I, of course, would hope, pray with all my heart and might that nothing untoward does take place. The second point being is the duplicitous standard when it comes to terrorism. There's the age-old adage of which keeps going around: one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But for countries that have collectively come together on the war on terror, that have collectively fought together hand in hand, have given each other assistance, we suddenly cannot have Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is not exercising his freedom of speech by threatening several hundred Indians and other nationalities about a plane that's going to be potentially bombed. That is not freedom of speech. That's not freedom of speech under any law anywhere in the world, and is incapable of poetic or even creative license.
That's right.
And therefore, when no action gets taken, India's past attempts to have a red corner notice issued against him when such attempts have been rejected on insufficiency of information, as in what more information can be asked for? And then every now and then to view these creative slides that are made. Mr. Nijjar is as much a community leader as Osama bin Laden is an engineering, procurement, and construction specialist. This false equivalence that constantly gets drawn in on whether it's on freedom of speech or preacher or community leader, we've got to get out of this mechanism. And both the United States and Canada have to see where lives have really been lost on this matter. This needs to be taken up at the highest levels, and Canada has to come off its high horse. And I think, coming back to the question that you raised at the start of this conversation, which was, is this going to result in seeing things relating to Mr. Nijjar's case differently? I think Mr. Nijjar's case, all said and done, remains in the genre of credible allegations, at least with what's there in the public domain, which is a standard that is unknown to both law as well as to diplomacy. The context of credible allegations is something that one really cannot comment on. But I do hope that these actions and Gurpatwant Singh Pannu finding himself one day in Canada, one day somewhere, one day in the United States, and making such inflammatory statements, such threats, action has to be taken. And if action cannot be taken, then this really speaks to a fundamental vacuum within which we view terrorism. Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is a terrorist first and a coward second, and I do agree with Ambassador Suri completely that he's a joker and a circus monkey on the third end of it. But that doesn't take away the fact that he is a terrorist.
And at this point, I do also want to call out my personal irritation. I rarely do that on the program, but today I looked at a statement from Rupi Kaur, who's an Indo-Canadian poet, saying that she would be boycotting the Diwali at the White House on the invitation of Joe Biden because of the Biden policy on Gaza. That is Ms. Kaur's prerogative. A lot of Indians have said, well done to her. But the fact is that, by contrast, Ms. Kaur has not taken any voluble, specific position calling for the arrest of a man like Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. And I just find that sort of, the wars that you choose to take a position on, the wars that you ignore, the free speech that you defend, the free speech that you clamp down, to be exactly the kind of duplicity, Sherbir, that you just referenced. So that was just something I wanted to personally call out. I just want to bring in Sherbir, you want to come in briefly, and then I want to bring in Chirayu after that. Sherbir?
Very, very quickly, I do think that there is a requirement for progressive members of the Sikh community to come out and denounce this nonsense. At the same point of time, I don't believe we need to be called out if we don't. But as far as Ms. Kaur's statements are concerned, given the very vociferous stand she has taken on multiple occasions, it would but demand that she does speak up about this. But there again does the duplicity come in, because an entire ecosystem, an immigration scandal of the highest proportions in terms of getting asylum in Canada, and and then that turning into a whole generation has been built on a slow drip of persecution that did not exist in order to gain asylum, citizenship, so on and so forth. So it becomes very difficult to go against a core a core bank, a core fan base in such situations and circumstances.
Yes, and I agree with you. I would never normally call out people for their silence, but she's a very vociferous sort of person who takes positions on any number of things. She's taken positions on farmers' protests, on the Modi government, on Israel-Palestine. So to that extent, her silence in this context was a little striking to me personally. But she's not the point. She's only an example. Chirayu, I want to bring you in. On the role of the United States of America, we know from the US ambassador to Canada's comments that the intelligence supposedly pointing to an Indian hand in the Nijjar assassination came from America to Canada. You also saw sort of somewhat gratuitous statements by US Secretary of State, now too distracted by what's happening in West Asia, talking about the concern with which India must respond to these allegations. This man was Nijjar's lawyer. Does this change anything? You wrote a column saying countries will find it hard to take unequivocal positions. Will this change that?
Barkha, thank you for having me. And I think it won't change anything. And Ambassador Suri is here. He is better placed to comment on diplomatic parlance. But if you take most comments that allies of Canada, especially the G7 countries, have made, we have concerns. We want India to cooperate. These are banal anodyne statement that means nothing. What they are saying effectively is that we have nothing to do with this mess. We are focused on the bigger prize in the Indo-Pacific. We want to focus with cooperation with India. India is a big market for us. Allow us to work cooperatively with India. You want to play your domestic politics, play within the confines of Canada. International stage is not for you. So some modicum of support came initially. Even Jake Sullivan made one or two statements saying that nobody is allowed to do this or to the effect of that. But after that, even the United States backed down. India gave a bit of flexible position that we are willing to cooperate if you come up with something concrete. But the fact is there is nothing concrete. And okay, so first let's deal with the international position and the United States first of all. Now, you see, initially everyone was a bit skeptical about India, and everyone assumed that Canada would build a case drip by drip by leaking things to the press, making sure that they build a case like the way Turkish media did against Mohammed bin Salman in Khashoggi murder, so on and so forth. Nothing of that set happened. And I myself wrote a column, the column that you are referring to, I wrote exactly a month after him speaking in Parliament. And we were assuming, waiting for the drip, we were assuming some bits and pieces of the evidence to come out. Nothing has come out. And it has been like, 3 weeks since I have wrote the column, 7 weeks since it stood up in Parliament, and nothing has come out. It means there is no evidence. It is just some hearsay, somebody's wiretapping, somebody referring to something. I mean, you can't create and build international cases and stir up diplomatic rows over some hearsay. That is not how international diplomacy is concerned. And some people initially thought that Trudeau was serious, but now he has lost all his credibility. Keep repeating this, to borrow the phrase, genre of credible allegation. I mean, this is completely manufactured. Now, there is without that evidence, there is no case. Now, let's come to the Pannun matter and how this goes. I'll refer your audience to the second Shishir Gupta column that he wrote in the immediate aftermath of it. And there, he has reportedly said that our current national security advisor told CIA that we have not taken out Pannun because he is a CIA asset. I don't know how true it is. It is reported on the pages of Hindustan Times. But if that is the case, then it then creates a lot of problems at so many levels, because then it creates another friction point. If Pannun is going to make this kind of statements, and if Pannun is reportedly to be believed having some kind of connections to the CIA as well, this stirs up a lot of other problems between India and the United States.
Let me actually pick that up and take it to Ambassador Suri. It reminds me of a man called David Headley. If you would remember Headley after 26/11, that he was a double agent, I think has now been well established. He goes undercover in Pakistan for the Drug Enforcement Administration of the United States of America. He then becomes the mastermind of the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, and he then is he basically, I don't know, is reported, and there are fevered whispers about him once again being an asset of American intelligence. And I'm sure you've heard these reports as much as I have, probably more. Now you have the same sort of whispers about Pannun. It makes no sense. But the commonsensical question is, if not, why would the Americans just not extradite him? Why would the Americans at least not arrest him?
Yeah, so, we're now entering the shadowy world of assets and agents and double agents and rogue agents and all of that. And Barkha, this is a subject on which the only productive conversations will be the ones that can be done firmly, clearly behind the scenes. I don't think any amount of public discussion on a subject like this will produce anything. But yes, it is also the kind. If today we say that our relationship with US is mature and multifaceted, and we can speak candidly, including on issues where we disagree with each other, then this matter deserves to come on the agenda in conversations that EM or NSA have with Jake Sullivan or with Anthony Blinken so frequently, so repeatedly on the whole gamut of issues. So yes, I would agree that it is something, but without the glare of publicity, it would be effective.
Fair enough, but are you disappointed? Are you disappointed by the response? The Canadians' response is evident. Are you disappointed by the response of the Americans?
I don't know to what extent and at what level we have taken it up. If we have taken it up at a sufficiently senior level, like at the level of the national security advisors, and if we have been made certain promises, then I would certainly be disappointed that he is still able to operate with the impunity he does. But, being outside of government now, I don't know when and with what force we've taken up this matter with the Americans. I just feel that, hypothetically, if I were in a situation where I could make a difference in this, I would use three different instruments at my command. One is the official channels at the level of NSA and so on. I would use our relationships in the US Congress to create pressure within the Congress about the activities. And I would certainly, both in the US and Canada, Barkha, just as you've shown the poll about the lack of awareness of Kanishka, I would use the Pew Opinion poll.
We have that too. We have that too. Yes, yeah, 95%. 95% of Sikhs
are strongly patriotic, and 70% would feel offended if there was some harm to India, right?
Yeah.
And that's maybe it's all equally important to get that data out in the public domain as well.
Yeah, I think we should pull up those slides of the Pew survey, and we'll have them up in just a moment. But let me bring in Sanjay now. Sanjay, this is all geopolitical debating, but as someone personally impacted, you would expect what of the government at this point?
Barkha, 2 points. I just want to take you back to 1985 before I come to Pannun. In 1985, you will remember that Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited Canada, visited the US on a state visit to meet Reagan. And that was in June of 1985. About 25 days before the bombing of the Kanishka. I will also tell you that the US Secret Service and the FBI, along with the CSIS, visited Parmar and Rayat to make sure they were not up to hanky-panky. Because the World Sikh Organization had a meeting in New York and in California 2-3 months prior, where they had threatened not only to bomb an aircraft of Air India, they had threatened to bomb an Indian mission. They also threatened to take out our prime minister. So this led everybody to believe, and even in the inquiry of John Major, this comes out pretty clearly that there was knowledge in the American network of spies that there was possibly a mole within that setup. So it's not unimaginable that today, what Chirayu has said, that someone else has written, that Pannun could very well be a mole of the CIA. I don't, I don't know.
You're basically saying your research has showed you that before Kanishka, let me just understand this. The Canadian intelligence for sure had wind of the fact that something terrible was coming, or they didn't act on it, but they knew it. I think you've said in your previous interview to me that some of that evidence was destroyed. You believe that those tapes no longer exist. Yes, that's the survey, by the way, that Ambassador Suri was referencing. 95% of Indian Sikhs say they're proud to be Indian. That came from the Pew Research Center. And of course, they're also proud Punjabis and proud Indians. So I just wanted to underline that. But Sanjay, let's go back to you. Yes. So you said that before Kanishka bombing, the Canadian intelligence had wind of it, and so did the CIA. Right?
I'm saying the Secret Service, who protects the president
the Secret
of
Service,
the United States, came to Canada. See, it's very different knowledge. They made a trip to Canada before Rajiv Gandhi landed in the United States. They checked out Parmar. It's all recorded, Barkha. All this is recorded in the tapes, in transcripts of the John Major inquiry. So what it means is, more than a month prior to the bombing of the Kanishka and the arrival of Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi into the United States to meet Ronald Reagan, the US Secret Service had already gone to Parmar and company, because at the World Sikh Organization meeting in New York and in California, their moles had already intercepted that there was going to be attacks. They didn't want it happening on their soil. I just wanted to point this out. So therefore, it's quite evident that there are moles from the intelligence networks within these organizations. That's one point.
Yeah.
The second point, I just want to pull up. Whilst I was talking to you, I spoke of the Patriot Act, and I just want to point this out to you. And destruction of an aircraft or aircraft facilities, the law specifically addresses the destruction or attempted destruction of aircraft. Interstate communications threatening to injure someone or damage property through interstate communication can result in federal charges. And the third one is interference with flight crew members, flight attendants, or any flights. This is USC 46504, 46507, and 875 of the Patriot Act. Now, this is prison without trial, literally. This is like our olden days TADA. That is how strict the regulations in the US. Everybody's keeping quiet. Why? That's my point.
Yeah. And Sherbir, I think Ambassador Suri is correct that espionage, spy games, these are never things that can be discussed. As much as they can be feverishly speculated, they can never be discussed between governments except behind closed doors. But Sanjay Lazar has a point. The law is clear. American law is clear. International law is clear. Indian law is clear. Why is this man still free? Sherbir?
If the governments of the United States and Canada, without speaking on their behalf, of course, would like to take action against Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, I believe they have all the evidence they need, which is in the public domain, let alone the need for the Indian government to make a formal protest on a matter such as this. A terrorist threat, which would result, if executed, would result in the loss of civilian lives, which could include members of multiple nationalities, is not something that needs elaborate legal process and procedure. The elaborate legal process and procedure, and let's not forget that the United States does have a history of circumnavigating procedure on matters of national security, and a very rich and diverse history at such procedural circumnavigation. So if action has to be taken, action can be taken. That no action is being taken, I will dial back to what Ambassador Suri says. We just don't know why. But what we can comment as impacted parties, as an enraged Indian, what I can comment on is the absolute duplicity in standards. If this was, I believe Veer Sanghvi made a very pertinent remark that if this was a threat made against a Western nation, and from Canadian or American soil, would the same standard be applied? And if this threat was of of American lives and Canadian lives at stake, involved, a United airliner or an Air Canada airliner, which is something I said, would the same level of callousness be deployed? And I think that's really the central question on this. Why the duplicity? Why is your terrorist a terrorist? And why is Guru Patwant Singh Pannu exercising his right to freedom of speech and expression? I think that is the standard that all of us can contest. Whatever happens behind closed doors, I'm sure the government of India is taking it up appropriately with their counterparts.
I absolutely bang on. But Chirayu, here's the question to you then. You said that the G7 may not have wanted to wade in to the Indo-Canadian spat. The Americans had to make noises to sort of be taking their closest allies seriously. But in the face of this incontrovertible evidence, which is Pannu on camera. Now imagine for a moment, as Sherbi says, close your eyes and replace Air India with United, Delta, Alaska Air. What would the Americans be doing?
Barkha, a couple of points. First, when Jake Sullivan made the first initial statement that no country is exempt from extrajudicial killings, it came out at the highest statement of irony, because it is coming from a US national security advisor, and without going into the evidence side of it or whether Indian government was involved on it, the first gut reaction of many of the analysts like us on Twitter was, is this coming from you? Seriously? So, like, if you have a threat to your homeland, you have all the tools at your disposal and you use it indiscriminately to kill people, sometimes at collateral damage of civilians, and you make sure that your homeland is secure. But if somebody else does this, you say you don't have the special exemption. What is this world where we are living in, where you make the rules and we follow the rules? I mean, your lives matters and brown lives don't matter. That was the gut reaction of many of us, and perhaps some of the Western analysts were not able to digest this reaction coming from India. But there is another point. A few comments during the last half an hour were made regarding how seriously we should take Pannu and whether Pannu has the wherewithal. I think the fact that let's forget the United States for a second. Let's address the main issue here. Why this is all happening? It is happening because of Trudeau's vote bank politics. It is happening because of Trudeau's
that explains Canada. What explains Biden's, the Biden administration not prioritizing this?
Look, Barkha, there are two aspects to this. Let's first address the Canada aspect, and then I'll quickly come to the United States as well. The Canada aspect, the moment you tolerate, see, the fact that somebody is making a threat to someone else's life is in itself punishable. And if Trudeau is boasting all about rule of law, this is not something rule-adopting, rule-abiding countries accept. This is unacceptable by any civilizational standards. So he should be nabbed. The fact that you are tolerating it, it means that you give us political support, you scratch our back, you vote for us, and we will allow your vileful buffoonery, we will allow all the political contempt that you are directing at Hindus, at India. All those things are acceptable. That's one aspect of it. Now, for the United States, they are in a very difficult situation. If you place yourself in where United States is sitting, their cooperation with Canada is much thicker than theirs is with us. So they will initially have to lean on the Canadian side. There's a compulsion of geopolitics. There is compulsion of alliance. They can't simply wash off their hands and say that, oh, India is very important, or this seems like dubious or spurious, so we are not going to come and support you. There are compulsions of alliance, and that is where they have to stand together. United States was not critical when Trudeau was doing all this, seemingly very harsh position that he took during the Freedom Convoy protest, and United States was not critical. Even the New York Times calling out that when the farm protests were going on in India, you said that protests are good, but you are not adopting the same standard. New York Times did it, but the United States could not take a position against its ally government. So I think those are compulsions within which United States.
I get that on the Nijjar killing, Ambassador Suri, and Ambassador, yeah, and those are examples, by the way, on your screen of the extrajudicial assassinations by the Americans. But my question to you, Ambassador Suri, is this: okay, I get the Americans walking this tightrope on Nijjar. What is the tightrope to? Why is this man not behind bars? I am just asking that simple question.
Yeah, and I think he's given enough reason for action to be taken against him. And this particular statement that he's made now on Air India, with the brazenness with which the threats have been made, deserves action to be taken. I would just expect, as I said, that our government, our ambassador, others would be taking up very strongly with the Americans, showing them the videos, showing them everything else. But of course, we think that the Americans ought to be already knowing this. But maybe it's not as much on their front burner, and it is really our responsibility, of Government of India's responsibility, to make sure that when you have any meeting with the Americans at the level of President, Prime Minister, NSA, Defense Secretary, you're going to have the 2+2 in a couple of days, right? In a time. Well, put it on top of your 5 points that you want to discuss, as important as China is. Make sure that it figures in the agenda of our bilateral discussions at places where it matters, so that we reiterate the seriousness with which we view this matter, and ask for tangible, verifiable steps to be taken by the government, and say that we are going to be watching it. There are plenty of opportunities that come for high-level engagements, which will again a few weeks later give us the chance to review, okay, what have you done in the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks on this? We're still waiting.
Absolutely. I agree totally. Sherbi, quick last thought before I give Sanjay the closing word. Sherbi, I had a question though before you react. I mean, isn't it ironic? We've spoken so much about duplicity. The world is fully absorbed in a debate around terrorism vis-a-vis the human rights of civilians, Israel, Gaza, of course. There is such a raging global debate around terrorism, and India and India's concerns yet again do not figure squarely at the heart of that conversation, and that really irritates me. Sherbi?
It does me as well, Barkha. It does me as well. I think I think I've used the word duplicitous far too many times, but I'm going to go a step further and say it's just absolutely shameful that a threat of terrorist action, a threat to kill innocent civilians is taken very seriously in one part of the world, and suddenly it becomes irrelevant when it's in another part of the world. It's shameful. These are aspects of what we call universal law. They're unlikely to change. Forget the law, just the ethics of it, the morality of it is, has a very singular answer. There is no binary posture that's available to something. I would go back and agree with Ambassador Suri that at times these matters may not get the attention that they deserve for several reasons. I think the Canadians have less reasons to believe this, given all the shanty that they've created. But as far as the Americans are concerned, there could be a benefit of doubt position, and therefore our diplomatic push in terms of bringing this matter to the top of the agenda, expressing the seriousness of this, and also telling them how a group of these folks are trying to game the system. I've said this on multiple occasions, merely being a member of Simranjeet Singh Man's party gives you political asylum when Simranjeet Singh Man is sitting in our parliament on giving some, concocted letterhead story of persecution, as in where is the persecution if the man can get elected to parliament? So, I think there are a lot of important conversations to be had, but I share your rage, Barkha. I feel it very much as an Indian, and I do hope that nothing happens with this bogus threat or this cartoonish threat that Gurpatwant Singh Pannun has made. But more importantly, I think this will only rest when concrete, definitive action is taken against him, and not just merely, lip service that we do something.
Well said. And we do have a big, as Ambassador Suri pointed out, a big US-India bilateral coming up in 2 days from now. It's a perfect context to place this on the table. You also have an impending visit of the Prime Minister that was scheduled for San Francisco, but that is actually not taking place. But that said, there will be this big chance, as Ambassador Suri said, to raise this at the top of the agenda. Sanjay, last word to you.
If you watch Pannun's statement again, he doesn't talk about blowing up an aircraft from Canada alone. Air India flies to almost 40 flights a week, even in the US. This man is in the US. Number one, Twitter has not taken his account down or the video down. Number two, the US should realize he has actually threatened Air India flights all across. That's grounds for his arrest. And thirdly, I know our government is taking it up extremely strongly, and we need to be very careful. I pray that nothing comes in, and this guy should be jailed. He should be jailed for many, many years, because he's caused diplomatic problems for our diplomats there. He's caused enraged violence, and he's causing threats in India even today. And
I have to just say special thanks. I have to say special thanks to you. And all other families, who have been left behind, after the Kanishka bombing, for still finding the courage and the compassion to participate in these public conversations, because I know you have to put a sort of stone on your heart to do it. So thank you, Sanjay. And thank you very much to Sherbir, to Chirayu, to Ambassador Suri, and to our audience for watching. We'll keep following this story. See you soon, and thank you for watching.
Mojo Story has always made a commitment to its viewers to go to where the story is. And as you can see here, we are at the epicenter of the Israel war on Gaza. We are right at the front line, about 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli military gets ready with its tanks and its gunners to begin its final frontal assault that will take troops into Gaza. As we said, we are not like other organizations. We believe in giving you all sides of the story objectively and as much as possible from the ground. And that's exactly what we're doing here, covering the biggest global story today from the epicenter of the war zone. So please, we need your support. Support us, become a Mojo member, subscribe to us, spread the word, and thank you for your support.